fortune had not always been kind to him. Once wealthy, he had lost his entire fortune when his fleet of ships sank in a storm, leaving him and his 6 children in dire straits. The family had to sell their grand home and move to a modest cottage on the outskirts of the village. While Laurent's older children struggled to adjust to their new life, his youngest daughter, Camille, embraced the change with grace. She learned to bake bread, tend to the garden, and mend clothes, finding joy in the simple pleasures of their humble life. One day, Laurent received news that one of his lost ships had been found, its cargo intact. Overjoyed, he prepared to journey to the port city to reclaim his fortune. Before leaving, he asked each of his children what gift they would like him to bring back. The older siblings requested fine clothes and jewels, but Camille, ever thoughtful, asked only for a single rose. "They are so rare and beautiful, Father," she said softly. "A rose would remind me of the beauty in the world, even in difficult times." Laurent chuckled at her request, but promised to bring her the most beautiful rose he could find. The journey to the port city was long, but Laurent's heart was light with hope. However, upon arriving, he discovered that his creditors had seized the cargo to pay off his debts. Heartbroken and empty-handed, he began the journey home, his spirits as heavy as the storm clouds gathering overhead. As night fell, a fierce storm erupted. Lightning split the sky, and rain lashed against the trees. Laurent's horse, frightened by the thunder, bolted off the main road and into the dark forest. Lost and desperate, Laurent searched for shelter until he spotted a tall stone wall and an imposing iron gate. Pushing it open, he found himself in the courtyard of a grand chateau. The mansion loomed before him, its windows dark and foreboding. Laurent knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Gathering his courage, he stepped inside, finding a warm fire crackling in the hearth and a table set with a simple meal. Exhausted and hungry, he ate the food and fell asleep in a comfortable armchair. The next morning, Laurent awoke to find the mansion silent and empty. Feeling guilty for taking advantage of the unknown host's hospitality, he decided to leave quietly. But as he passed through the courtyard, he noticed a rose bush blooming with the most exquisite roses he had ever seen. Remembering his promise to Camille, he picked a handful of roses. Suddenly, a deep rumbling voice echoed through the courtyard. "What do you think you are doing?" Laurent turned to see a towering figure, a man with wild, unkempt hair and piercing eyes. His appearance was fearsome, but his voice carried a note of sorrow. "You took advantage of my hospitality, ate my food, and now you steal my roses, roses that hold great meaning to me." Trembling, Laurent explained his promise to his daughter. The beast, as the man was known, listened intently before delivering his verdict. "You must repay your debt. Either you stay here as my servant, or send one of your children in your place." Laurent pleaded for mercy, but the beast was firm. "You have 1 week to decide." When Laurent returned home, his children were eager to hear of his journey. But instead of gifts, he brought only the roses and a heavy heart. He told them of the beast's demand, and the room fell silent. Camille, ever selfless, stepped forward. "I will go," she said softly. "Father, you are needed here. I will take your place." Laurent's eyes filled with tears, but he knew there was no other way. The next morning, Camille packed her few belongings and set off with her father to the chateau. As they approached the iron gate, Camille felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. The mansion was both beautiful and eerie, its stone walls covered in ivy, and its windows reflecting the pale light of the setting sun. When they reached the door, a young boy named Gabriel greeted them. He led Camille inside, leaving Laurent to return home alone. Gabriel showed Camille to a grand bedroom with a canopied bed and a cozy window seat. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room. "The Baron will see you tomorrow," Gabriel said before leaving her to rest. Camille sat by the window, gazing out at the overgrown gardens. The wind whispered through the trees, and the stars began to appear in the night sky. Despite her fears, she felt a strange sense of peace. This place, though mysterious, held a quiet beauty that touched her heart. As she drifted off to sleep, Camille dreamed of a grand library filled with books, their pages whispering secrets of wisdom and love. She awoke the next morning to the sound of bird song, ready to face whatever the day would bring. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Camille's room, casting a golden glow on the polished wooden floors. She awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside, their melodies soft and soothing. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, but the room was still warm and inviting. Gabriel arrived with a tray of breakfast, freshly baked bread, a pot of honey, and a steaming cup of herbal tea. "The Baron requests your presence in his study after you've eaten," he said with a cheerful smile. Camille thanked him and ate her meal slowly, savoring the warmth of the tea and the sweetness of the honey. As she dressed in her simple yet tidy clothes, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of nervousness. What would the Baron be like? Would he be as fearsome as her father had described? Gabriel led Camille through the grand halls of the chateau, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone floors. Portraits of stern-looking nobles lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her as she passed. Finally, they reached a pair of tall wooden doors. Gabriel knocked gently, and a deep voice called from within, "Enter." The study was a room of contradictions, grand yet cozy, filled with books and papers, but also warm and inviting. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the scent of aged leather and ink filled the air. Behind a large desk sat the Baron, his imposing figure softened by the gentle light of the fire. Camille curtsied politely, and the Baron gestured for her to sit. "You are Camille," he said, his voice low but not unkind. "I understand you have come to take your father's place." "Yes, my lord," she replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I hope to be of service to you." The Baron studied her for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. "You are brave to come here," he said finally. "This chateau is not an easy place to live, but if you are willing to work hard, you will find it has its own kind of magic." He handed her a heavy ring of keys. These will open most of the rooms in the house. Gabriel will show you around and help you with your duties. I trust you to manage the household as you see fit. Camille nodded, feeling a sense of responsibility settle over her. Thank you, my lord. I will do my best. Gabriel gave Camille a tour of the chateau, and she was struck by its grandeur and neglect. The halls were lined with dusty portraits and forgotten treasures, and many of the rooms were shrouded in sheets untouched for years. But there was beauty in the decay, a sense of history and mystery that captivated her. The library, however, was a place of wonder. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with volumes of every size and color. A rolling ladder allowed access to the highest shelves, and 2 leather armchairs sat by the fire, inviting her to sit and read. The Baron spends most of his time here, Gabriel explained. He says the books are his greatest treasure. Camille ran her fingers along the spines of the books, feeling the texture of the aged leather. It's like a dream, she whispered. That evening, Camille prepared a simple dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables, using the supplies Gabriel had brought from the village. She set the table in the grand dining room, the crystal chandelier above casting a soft, warm light. The Baron joined her, his appearance still imposing, but his demeanor gentle. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the clink of silverware against china. After dinner, the Baron spoke. You have done well today, Camille. I can see that you are capable and kind. Perhaps this arrangement will be beneficial for us both. Camille smiled. I hope so, my lord. I already feel at home here. That night, Camille dreamed again. She found herself wandering the halls of the chateau, guided by the soft glow of a candle. The air was filled with the scent of roses, and the sound of distant music echoed through the corridors. She came to a door and pushed it open, finding herself in a grand ballroom. The Baron stood in the center of the room, his appearance transformed. He was no longer fearsome, but handsome and regal, his eyes filled with warmth. Camille, he said, holding out his hand, will you dance with me? She took his hand, and they began to waltz, the music swelling around them. As they danced, the room filled with a light, and the chateau seemed to come alive, its walls glowing with a golden hue. When Camille awoke, she felt a sense of peace and hope. The chateau was no longer a place of fear, but a place of possibility. As the days turned into weeks, Camille settled into a rhythm at the chateau. Each morning, she awoke to the soft chirping of birds outside her window and the faint scent of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. Gabriel would bring her breakfast, and they would discuss the day's tasks, dusting the grand hall, airing out the unused rooms, or tending to the overgrown gardens. The Baron, whom she now called Antoine, spent most of his time in the library, surrounded by towering stacks of books. Camille often brought him tea or a light meal, and they would talk about the books he was reading. He spoke of philosophy, history, and the wisdom of ancient thinkers, his voice warm and inviting. Camille found herself drawn to his kindness and intellect, and the more they talked, the more she saw the man behind the fearsome exterior. One afternoon, Antoine invited Camille to join him in the library. The room was bathed in golden light, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. He handed her a small leather-bound book. "This is one of my favorites," he said. "It's a collection of poems about love and nature. I thought you might enjoy it." Camille opened the book, her fingers tracing the delicate pages. The words seemed to dance before her eyes, painting pictures of blooming gardens and starlit skies. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you." Antoine smiled, a rare and gentle expression. "You have a curious mind, Camille. I think you will find much to love in this library." From that day on, Camille spent her evenings reading by the fire, losing herself in the stories and poems that filled the shelves. The library became her sanctuary, a place where she felt truly at peace. As spring turned to summer, Camille turned her attention to the gardens. With Gabriel's help, she cleared away the weeds and pruned the rose bushes, coaxing them back to life. The courtyard soon became a riot of color, with roses of every shade blooming in abundance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Camille and Antoine walked through the gardens together. The air was filled with the sweet scent of roses, and the sound of crickets created a soothing symphony. "This was my mother's favorite place," Antoine said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "She loved roses. She said they reminded her of the beauty and resilience of life." Camille smiled. "I can see why. They're so full of life, even after years of neglect." Antoine looked at her, his eyes soft. "You've brought life back to this place, Camille. Not just to the gardens, but to the chateau itself." That night, Camille dreamed of the ballroom again. This time, the room was filled with people, nobles in elegant gowns and suits, their laughter and chatter creating a joyful hum. Antoine stood at the center of the room, his appearance transformed once more. He held out his hand to her, and they danced together, the music swelling around them. As they twirled across the floor, Camille noticed that the walls of the chateau were no longer dark and foreboding. They glowed with a warm golden light, and the air was filled with the scent of roses. When she awoke, she felt a sense of hope and wonder. The dream felt so real, as if it were a glimpse of what could be. As the weeks passed, Camille and Antoine grew closer. They shared meals, discussed books, and walked through the gardens together. Camille began to see Antoine not as a beast, but as a kind and thoughtful man who had been shaped by his past. She noticed small changes in him, the way his eyes softened when he spoke of his mother, the way he smiled when she brought him a new book to read. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the library, Antoine spoke of his curse. "I was once a vain and foolish man," he said quietly. "I cared only for wealth and status. and I treated others with little kindness. It was my own actions that led to this curse. Camille listened intently, her heart aching for him. "But you've changed," she said. "You're not that man anymore." Antoine sighed. "Perhaps, but the curse remains. I fear I will never be free of it." Camille reached out and placed her hand on his. "You're not alone anymore, Antoine. Whatever happens, I'm here." One morning, Camille noticed that the rose bush by the pergola was blooming more beautifully than ever. The flowers were larger and more vibrant, their petals a deep velvety red. She knelt beside the bush, inhaling their sweet fragrance. Gabriel approached, a smile on his face. "It's like the chateau itself is coming back to life," he said. "Ever since you arrived, everything feels different, lighter, brighter." Camille smiled, but a thought nagged at the back of her mind. The rose bush was special to Antoine, a reminder of his mother. She wondered if its transformation was a sign of something greater, a sign that the curse could be broken. That evening, as Camille and Antoine walked through the gardens, she told him about the rose bush. "It's blooming like never before," she said. "It's as if it's responding to the changes in the chateau." Antoine looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Perhaps," he said softly, "but curses are not easily broken." Camille took his hand. "We'll find a way, Antoine, together." As they stood there, the first stars began to appear in the night sky, their light reflecting in the windows of the chateau. For the first time in years, Antoine felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the curse could be lifted. As summer gave way to autumn, the chateau seemed to come alive in new ways. The gardens were ablaze with golden leaves, and the air was crisp with the scent of fallen apples and wood smoke. Camille and Antoine spent their days tending to the estate, their bond growing stronger with each passing week. One afternoon, as they walked through the orchard, Camille noticed a single rose blooming on the bush by the pergola. It was unlike any rose she had ever seen. Its petals were a deep, shimmering crimson, and it seemed to glow with an inner light. "Antoine, look," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's beautiful." Antoine gazed at the rose, his expression unreadable. "That rose is special," he said quietly. "It's tied to the curse. When the last petal falls, the curse will be permanent." Camille's heart sank. How many petals are left? Antoine hesitated. Only a few. The curse is nearing its end. That evening, Camille sat by the fire in the library, her mind racing. She couldn't bear the thought of Antoine being trapped forever. Determined to find a way to break the curse, she began searching through the books, looking for any clue that might help. As she pulled a heavy volume from the shelf, a small folded piece of parchment fell to the floor. She picked it up and unfolded it, her eyes scanning the elegant script. It was a letter written by Antoine's mother. "To whoever finds this letter, Know that the curse can only be broken by an act of true love, not the love of riches or status, but the love that sees beyond appearances and embraces the heart within. My son, Antoine, is not the man he once was. He has learned humility and kindness, but he must learn to love and be loved in return. Only then will the curse be lifted. Camille's heart raced as she read the words. True love. Could it be that simple? She thought of the way Antoine's eyes softened when he spoke to her, the way he had opened his heart and his home to her. Could she be the one to break the curse? The next morning, Camille found Antoine in the library, his head bent over a book. She approached him quietly, the letter clutched in her hand. Antoine, she said softly, I found something. He looked up, his eyes filled with curiosity. What is it? She handed him the letter, watching as he read it. His hands trembled, and when he looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. My mother, he whispered. She always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Camille knelt beside him, taking his hand. Antoine, I care for you, more than I ever thought possible. If this curse can be broken by love, then let me help you. Antoine looked at her, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. Camille, you deserve so much more than a life tied to a cursed man. I don't want to burden you. She shook her head. You're not a burden, Antoine. You're kind, thoughtful, and brave. You've shown me a world of beauty and wisdom, and I can't imagine my life without you. That night, Camille dreamed of the ballroom once more. This time, the room was filled with light, and the walls were adorned with blooming roses. Antoine stood at the center of the room, his appearance transformed. He was no longer a beast, but a man of grace and dignity, his eyes filled with love. As they danced, the music swelled, and the room seemed to dissolve around them. When Camille awoke, she felt a sense of peace and certainty. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Camille went to the rose bush. The final petal was trembling, ready to fall. She reached out and gently cupped the rose in her hands, closing her eyes. I love you, Antoine, she whispered. Not for what you were, but for who you are. You've shown me the beauty of kindness, the strength of humility, and the power of love. Please, let that be enough. As she spoke, the rose began to glow, its light spreading through the garden and into the chateau. The air was filled with the scent of roses, and the sound of distant music echoed through the halls. When Camille opened her eyes, she saw Antoine standing before her, his appearance transformed. He was no longer a beast, but a man of striking beauty, his eyes filled with warmth and gratitude. Camille, he said, his voice trembling. You've done it. You've broken the curse. The chateau itself seemed to come alive, its walls glowing with a golden light. The gardens bloomed with vibrant colors, and the air was filled with the sound of birdsong and laughter. Camille and Antoine stood together in the courtyard, their hands clasped. You've given me a second chance, Antoine said. a chance to live a life of love and kindness. I will spend the rest of my days making sure you never regret it." Camille smiled, her heart full. "I could never regret loving you, Antoine. You've shown me the true meaning of beauty, not in appearances, but in the heart." As the years passed, Camille and Antoine transformed the chateau into a place of warmth and joy. The library became a haven for scholars and dreamers, and the gardens were open to all who sought peace and beauty. Together they built a life filled with love, laughter, and the magic of kindness. And every evening, as the sun set and the stars began to twinkle, they would walk through the gardens, their hands entwined, the scent of roses filling the air. The curse was gone, but its lesson remained, a reminder that true beauty lies within, and that love has the power to transform even the darkest of hearts.